infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
In the latest episodes of Jim Harold's Campfire, Jim speaks with people who've encountered everything from strange lights to the Hat Man, demons, and even a skinwalker. Now these are real people with real experiences. Some are happy and positive, while others are downright terrifying. They're on the no list, as I would say. Once you listen into the campfire, it will be no wonder that Jim's shows have been downloaded over 60 million times. He covers topics that range from hauntings to UFOs, cryptids, and good old can't put your finger on 'em head scratchers. You can tune into Jim Harold's Campfire on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to Into the Fray. Well, yeah, Lisa, welcome on to Into the Fray. You got in touch and you wanted to share some encounters, and I don't know where you wanted to start, but the one, of course, that because you mentioned that the Castle in the Sky story from Daytona Beach, you did share on Jim Harold's Campfire. You brought that up to me, and I'm kind of going, well, I don't see how I can't have you tell that one because it sounds very interesting. So I don't know if you wanted to start it in that spot or where we wanted to go in our travels today. But yeah, welcome on. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Well, thank you. No, I'd be happy to tell you about that strange experience. I think it was, let's see, I must have been about 14, so probably around 79. I want to say the summer of 1979, I think it was. And my family, my mom, dad, brother, and I had gone down to Daytona Beach. And we got there the first day, it was later evening, and my dad, my brother, and I went down to walk on the beach. And we were excited because we were going to go to Disney World the next day, like we do. And so we're just kind of walking along, looking at the water and the shells, and my brother and I look up in the sky, and I was like, oh, that's cool. You can see Disneyland from here, or Disney World from here. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, no. Disney World is the opposite direction. I'm looking east out across the ocean, and I'm like, and my brother, I'm like, do you see that? And he goes, yeah. What the heck? And so it was a castle, like literally made out of clouds, like sitting on a cloud, just like you would. I mean, it almost looked like a reflection. And I've heard of, I can't remember the name of them now, but where they have reflections of cities out over the ocean. Can't remember what that's called, like some kind of a mirage, but there's a name for it. But it wasn't like that at all. I mean, it wasn't exactly like the Disneyland castle, but it had turrets. You could see the bricks. You could see, just everything about this castle. And it's in the clouds. It's like made out of clouds. So I'm like, what in the world? Well, the weird thing was my dad couldn't see it. So my brother and I are just freaking out looking at this castle. And I asked him about it not too long ago. I said, "Do you remember that?" And he's like, "Yeah." And Dad couldn't see it. Yeah. So I have no explanation for that one, but it was interesting, very interesting.
What did Jim have to say about that, or did he say that he had heard of anything similar to that encounter?
No, not really. I think he put a picture of it in his coloring book, if I remember right. And he thought it was fascinating too. And then here's something really weird that happened. So, I've told him about my castle story. And when my husband and I were driving from Minneapolis here to Arizona, where we moved, he got a job transfer and we were moving to Arizona. I was driving in, I think it was New Mexico, listening to Jim Herold's Campfire. And I looked up and I thought I saw like a really weird looking eagle thing in the sky. I'm like, that reminds me of the castle. Well, about that time, as I'm listening to Jim's Campfire, this guy comes on talking about how when he was in New Mexico, he saw an eagle made out of clouds in the sky.
What?
And it was like that whole, what's the word, coincidence thing. That blew my mind too. I'm like, how can, I don't even have words. It was just so bizarre. And I'm like,
how big was it?
I wonder if I'm seeing the same thing. Well, what I saw was not quite as detailed as what this gentleman was talking about that he saw. It sounded like he saw an eagle that was as detailed as the castle that I had seen. But what I saw was just like outstretched wings, like the clouds were just outstretched. And then there was like a little curl at the top, like a bird head, And I just remembered thinking, that kind of looks like an eagle. Because once you see a castle in the sky, you look around and see if you see anything else in the sky or if it's just you. So, that was a strange coincidence.
That is extremely strange timing. And you're like, no way, New Mexico and an eagle. His was, the eagles were flying, like moving. You could see these things moving.
I don't think they were moving. It was like they were just like a cloud up there, but really detailed, like a sculpture.
Right.
And what was really funny was the guy was talking about this eagle that he saw, and he mentioned that it reminded him of the story that I had told on the campfire.
Oh my gosh! It just keeps coming back around. Yeah.
Like, whoa.
That's pretty amazing, actually. Now, have you seen any other reports of anything similar to what you and now this gentleman have? Because at least there's one other person that's saying they've seen something like this. Have you heard of anything else?
Yeah, no. The only thing is, gosh darn it, I wish I could remember what they're called, but the Mirage thing where people will see like cities, but they're usually upside down, and it's literally a reflection somehow within the clouds. Gosh darn it, I wish I had written down what it was called. But
that's okay. I'm blanking on the thing that's called, like, it's not sky creatures. It's something similar to that. Everyone's going to be yelling probably at both of us as they're listening to this because they know the answers to these things. But yeah, it's sky something or other for maybe even something that's supposed to be under what I forget what it is. Now, see, look what we've done. Now it's going to bug me really badly. And then the second we get off the phone, it's going to come to us, but that's okay. I can always plug that into the show notes later because we will figure this out. But those are really cool sightings. I know that a lot of times with, of course, the UFO field, that kind of a thing comes up because not specifically seeing a castle or, what you would think of as an eagle, but people saying that they hide in the clouds, So then you go, well, if the people think that the UFOs hide in the clouds, are they doing other things up there to throw us off? And then, of course, if you're talking to people that talk about like, maybe deep state isn't the right term for it, but government projects, let's say, they'll say, well, maybe it was some kind of a projection, to see who could see it. But if it's a projection, why couldn't your dad see it?
Right. And I have heard about things since then because, I'm a few years past 14 years old now, and I've looked up and tried to find out information about it several times. And I think at one point I did read that, I guess it was the military, had some sort of a thing they were working for to project pictures up into the sky somehow, for whatever their nefarious purposes were, I guess. But
is that Bluebeam? I think it's Project Bluebeam. If I probably got that wrong. I think I'm remembering one, and it's probably way off, but that may be the project that you are speaking of. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, again, that doesn't explain why. I mean, I don't think they could turn projections off for 30 and up or whatever the age was, right? So that would be kind of strange because your dad never did see it. At least your brother saw it though, because so many times you have these sightings, and it's just you, and you're like, darn, it would have been cool to have someone else to share this with.
Yeah, and I was actually looking around at everybody else on the beach, like, has anybody else seen this but me? Everybody's just walking up and down the beach. I mean, it was like, late afternoon, 5 or 6 o'clock. One of the first things I thought was, that's really cool. I wonder how they did that. Like, Daytona is a really highly populated vacation spot, at least it was then. So,
and not one other person saw? I mean, you didn't notice anyone else look up and point or anything?
I didn't, but, at the same time, I was just so flabbergasted at the time. And oddly enough, my brother just kind of blew it off like, yeah, so, that's weird. And we just went on about our ways. And I'm standing there still scratching my head. And that one, that was weird.
That is a very cool sighting. Yeah, if anybody has come across anything like that on the web or, a podcast, anything, please send it along, and I'll send it to Lisa, because that is extremely unique outside of the norm of the sightings that we get. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that one. Well, where are we going next, Lisa?
I am not someone who has seen cryptids per se. Most of what my strange experiences in my few years in this lifetime have been in more in regards to like spirits and sort of being a sensitive, that type side of things. But there was this one time when, and I'm mentioning this because I was listening to some of your other podcasts, and I got my wires crossed and thought this one was more recent than it was. But this guy was talking about, I believe he was in Wisconsin, and he was talking about these sightings of a big black cat. I don't remember his name. I think his name was Jamie. Anyway, I grew up in a small town in Indiana, and it was a sleepy little town just about, 10 miles outside of Indianapolis, mainly farmers and people who would commute. We had lots of cornfields and that sort of thing. So this probably would have been around 1984. And my ex-husband and I were on his motorcycle, and it was actually late at night. We'd gone out for a long ride, and we were coming back through, there were cornfields on either side of us. Over to my right, it must have been fall because I kind of remember the cornfields. The corn was really tall, but it was like brown, I don't know what. They hadn't harvested it or whatever. And I saw the front half of a black animal walk into the corn. And it was like, all I saw were the front leg. I didn't see the head. It was already going through. But I saw the body of it and the tail. And at first I thought, oh, cool. I didn't know we had those in Indiana. I thought it was, it was like the black panther. Then I thought, no, maybe it was a German Shepherd or a black lab. But no, you know how the tails on a dog kind of come to a point, even if they're not particularly fluffy. But this had a cat tail. Like, I don't know how to explain what I mean by cat tail, but it was like rounded at the end. My ex-husband pulled over to the side of the road, and he's like, did you see that? I said, what do you think it was? And he said, that was like a black panther. And I said, yeah, I think so too. and we tried to report it to the DNR, and all they would say was, we don't have those in Indiana.
Yeah. Stop being so silly. You guys didn't see that.
Exactly.
I do think it's a little funny that the 3-letter agencies are not willing to come forward and admit that, but I guess I kind of see why. So I don't know that we're ever going to get that from them.
But I mean, I know I've worked in animal-related industries, let's just say, for most of my life. And I know for a fact that there for a while, people were getting cougars and animals and things like that as pets, and then just dumping them. It wouldn't surprise me if somehow or another a bunch of these dumped pets have gotten together and managed to survive out there.
Yeah. Life finds a way, right?
It does. Heck yeah. It was like so natural, but at the same time, it was like, wait a minute, that doesn't belong there.
Yeah, you're like, ooh, that is a big kitty cat. So again, you have someone else to corroborate your sighting. So that's fantastic.
That's true. I mean, that's some consolation, I guess.
Yeah, I really do think it is. Whether it's a cryptid or UFO, or like I always talk about my shadow person experience, but it would have been nice if my brother or stepbrother would have seen that. They were a little ways ahead of me, so that was not possible, but it would have been nice to have one of them have seen the same thing. And then I'm not thinking I'm a kook for so long, and I know what, you're like, I know what I saw, but holy smokes, that was really weird.
Oh yeah, and there's nothing more frustrating than when you know what you're talking about, but everybody else around you acts like you're, sure you did,
right.
And just blows it off. You're like, but no.
Yeah, you're like, no, it's not a misidentification. I saw a castle in the sky, or I saw an eagle in the sky, or it wasn't military men. I saw 4 shadow figures running through the woods, and they didn't have to dodge the trees. Mm-hmm. So, but at least we have that.
Yes. Speaking of shadow people, I remember my grandmother had dementia, and when we were just starting to notice it, she had this condominium that was the middle unit in between 2 others, and it was dark in there all the time, and she kept talking about how she saw these black people. She would call them these black people, not like African Americans, but like black people. And we didn't know what she meant, and then she'd be like, oh, she couldn't sleep at night because those black people were up walking all through her house and everything. Well, if I remember right, so my mom and my daughter spent a lot of time with her during that period of time. And one day my daughter came to me and said, did you know that there are like shadow people at Sweetie's house? I'm like, that must be what she's talking about, because it was a very creepy house anyway. I don't know if it was just because there wasn't a lot of light coming into this condo, or if there was something there before that was just, kind of that's the hairs on the back of your neck on end. But yeah, so I guess a lot of people in my family have been rather sensitive.
So she saw the shadow people that your grandma was talking about. She actually saw them with her own eyes?
Yeah. Yes.
And you mentioned earlier that you are maybe a little bit sensitive to this stuff. So if you would go into that place, had you ever felt anything or seen anything?
Well, I just didn't like it. I don't know how to explain it, but it was a brand new condominium that she had bought, and it was her pride and joy, but I just didn't like being there. It just felt sort of off. And it seemed like when she moved into that place, it seemed like that seemed to be the start of her dementia. I don't know if they've found any correlations between that sort of thing, like people who are more sensitive becoming more susceptible to dementia. I don't know. But it just had this feeling that you were being watched all the time, I guess. And it just seemed like I just have a whole lot of not nice memories of how her personality changed when she moved in there.
I wonder, Lisa, if, I mean, because you mentioned it was a new place, and this isn't always the end all be all, because new places can have activity too, of course. But a lot of times entities will follow people, from place to place for years. And I'm just wondering, and this is just conjecture, of course, but I'm just wondering if she had seen them for maybe even years or even a short time before the dementia started. And then because of the dementia, she kind of lost that filter of, because a lot of people don't like to talk about this stuff. And that's just conjecture, but that just popped into my head. Maybe the dementia made her a little bit more loosey-goosey with even talking about the fact that she was seeing these things.
Well, that could be, because she was extremely no nonsense, She was extremely like a control freak type person, matriarch of our family. Our little family was just her, my uncle, my mom, my dad, my brother, and I. That was our family unit, She was raised in Kentucky, in the Appalachians, and she was raised, where you didn't talk about that kind of stuff. But yet, I think there really was quite a bit of belief in it, or superstition, or whatever you want to say.
Right.
But she never wanted to talk about that kind of thing ever.
It's really sad, though, that she's having such a tough time, with her mental health, and then she's being kept up at night by these shadow people. Did she seem scared of them, or they were just more of an annoyance?
She seemed mad, like angry that they were bothering her, that was the kind of personality that she had,
She sounded like a tough lady.
Get out of my house.
She sounded like a real tough woman. Didn't put up with any crap, Like, listen, I'm trying to sleep here, guys. Give me a break.
Yeah, she's like, there they were, and they were in here again tonight. We all thought she was just losing it, but who knows? She was probably telling the truth.
Right, and isn't that the conundrum of that, especially that situation, when you have someone with dementia, then everyone would automatically just dismiss the whole thing. Well, she has dementia, so she's seeing people. I mean, or just making it up.
Yeah.
That's the unfortunate thing there, unless you get people like us that have a little bit more open minds about it and go, well, wait a minute, maybe she is seeing stuff and now she's just actually sharing it.
Yeah. And, I never put it together until like really years later. My daughter said to me, oh, you remember when Grandma was seeing all those shadow people? I'm like, what? She said, yeah, I remember when she was talking about seeing all the shadow people, and I told you that they were going in and out of the garage. I was like, oh, yeah. Huh, okay, I never put that together as necessarily shadow people, but maybe, okay, I get it.
Yeah, that was a good deduction. Yeah, absolutely.
What's even weirder is that so she ended up going into hospice, and my mom was there with her when she was passing. And she said that she kept looking up and reaching her hands up and talking, but she couldn't hear what she was saying. It was like she was talking to somebody up there, and she kept saying, I'll be there in a minute. I'll be there in a minute, and reaching her hands up. Yeah. And I've heard other instances of that sort of thing, that when somebody's getting ready to pass over, that they do that.
Those near-death stories, I find really, truly fascinating. And I just wonder how many people have had even more of those experiences. And I mean, maybe they wouldn't want to remember, but they maybe just can't. Now, you mentioned in your email that you've had an out-of-body experience. This might be a good segue into that, or should we go to another encounter first?
Well, I'll tell you a funny encounter, talking about people who have passed over, I guess. And oddly enough, I'm sitting here next to a hedgehog right now, which ties into this story. I just now remembered. But I had a fiance who, he had stage 4 cancer that started, I think, in the lymph node in his neck or something. Anyway, and he was really, really sick. And I was trying to hold down 2 jobs and take care of him and everything else. And one of my jobs I had was I worked for I was working at the zoo in Indianapolis, and I worked for an exotic pet vet at the same time. And she had sent me home with a little hedgehog. This little hedgehog had gotten some thread wrapped around its foot, and it cut the circulation off, and it had gotten really, really sick. But she told me she said, take this little guy home, and we'll just see if we can do anything about it. She said, I need you to put this medicine on his foot. He's not going to let you, but what you got to do is put him in the water, and then when he unfolds, then you can pull him out and put the medicine on, and then just put him back on the heat. She didn't think he was going to make it anyway, but she said, if you want to try this, you've got time. I said, okay, great. So I took him home, and my fiance was there with me at the time, and I was telling him what I was doing. I said, no, she told me to fill the sink up with warm water and set him in the water, and that he would uncurl and come up for breath, because I guess hedgehogs can swim pretty well. And when he does that, to go ahead and put the medicine on his foot. Well, the poor little hedgehog never came up for air, let's put it that way. And, he was just very weak and everything, and I didn't get him out of there on time. I was watching him the whole time, but it was just like, as soon as I put him in there, he just died, poor little guy. And so Steve, my fiance, was like, listen, I know I'm really sick, but I'm not going to let you give me any baths because I'm not that sick, and we always made a joke about it. He's like, baby, when it gets to the point where I feel like it's my time to go, that's when I'll let you give me a bath, but not. And, it was awful. So,
well, yeah,
so,
I can see where you just try to make it to where you don't want to cry about it every time you talk, right? So you just try to make it more light. I get that.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very intense. So to kind of make a long story short, he eventually did pass on. It was a big mess. There was a whole lot of horrible things that happened with his family, and I didn't even get to go to his funeral, and just a bunch of stuff. So anyway, several years later, in fact, probably I'd say a good 20 years later, I was talking to a friend of mine she does psychic readings, and I said, I've never done that before, but would you do one for me? And she said, sure. So I didn't tell her anything. It was just that kind of on the spot thing, and I've been married twice since then, and many, many years have gone by. So she didn't know anything of my backstory. She said, well, there's someone coming through that said you were supposed to be married to him at one time, but he died before you could get married. And I said, yeah, I know who you're talking about. And she says, this is going to sound weird, I don't know, but he keeps talking about feet, and he's laughing. And apparently he was talking about the hedgehog's foot. She said he's talking about feet and water, and he's laughing.
Oh my gosh.
Like, yeah, I know who that is. That was like, that was, as weird as it sounds, it put a really horrible time in my life gave me some closure. Because nobody else would have even known about that. I mean, I don't run around telling people that I drowned a hedgehog.
Right. Gosh, no, and I thought that was the end of the story when you like that. I thought the punchline was Steve said, "Oh, well, if I'm ever close to dying, I'll let you give me a bath." But I wasn't. I was not trying to laugh about. I didn't know the rest of the story, so I apologize about that. It wasn't a light story as far as that goes, but that is incredible that she brought a bath and feet and all of this. That you must have been going, okay, some of these folks are legit.
Yeah, and she's not one of those people that like goes online and makes people pay her and all that kind of stuff. She's just a normal person who just happens to have some sensitivities in that direction. So yeah, I guess that, it was time for me to know that everything about that situation was good and over, and, that he's moved on and we're all good.
That is nice closure. And that's just too funny because I also have a hedgehog here. Lisa. So we're twins in more ways than you know. Yeah, and they do actually swim pretty dang good. I think it was just his. Maybe he just wanted to go like that in the tub, because they are really, really darn good swimmers. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was just a really sick little guy, that she said, if you want to take them home and try, then take them home. And I did because, the owners didn't want to go through all that. So I'm like, I'm game to give him a try. Why not? But
well, that's nice of you to do. It's tough when you take in injured and the fosters that have kind of, we'll just say issues. Birds have issues, and dogs have issues, and everybody's. And it's interesting when they come from one or more homes, and you never know what's going on before you. So that's very selfless for you to do that. Poor little hedgehog, and of course, that was just so cool of Steve to come through and go, it's all good. We're cool, and to make you smile probably and say he's all good.
It's okay. And because it was kind of like, imagine that you are that close with somebody and you live together, but then all of a sudden one day their family comes and just totally cuts you out of the picture. And he was so far gone at that point that I think he only lasted another week when they did that.
Gosh.
But they just, it was just weird. Just completely cut me out of the picture, and I had no choice, and so I always felt like, I wish that I could have just said to him, I hope you don't think that I'm not here for your last moments because I don't want to be. It's because they won't let me.
Oh, that's horrible.
That was awful.
I am so sorry about that. That had to have been just horrendous to go through.
It was, because I'd been through all of the cancer stuff with him. And then what was really freaky was that when my current husband, we had gone through an awful lot, long distance relationship and all kinds of stuff. And finally we're together, and finally we're planning our wedding, and boom, all of a sudden he had stage 4 kidney cancer. And of course, having been through this before, my first thought was, oh no, this can't happen to me again. We've gone through so much to be together. It was like an 11-year process to get to finally be together. And wow. But then another part of me was like, oh, but wait a minute, you know how to do this. And I go, yeah, I know how to support somebody who's got scary cancer, and they'll make it. It'll be okay. And it was. And he's doing great. So
that's fantastic. And what a great way to look at it from your perspective. Instead of it, I would have probably been the same way. Me again, really, with this again, can I do this? And you're going, no, actually I can.
Yeah. And it was like, it's almost like so many things in my life. Like, I've made dumb mistakes like everybody does, and I've had things happen, but then later on in life, something else happens, and I'm like, oh, now I see why we had to go through that.
Right.
Because here's this, and if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't know how to deal with this. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What you think is a curse actually turns into a gift. So.
Yeah.
Well, what's next, Lisa?
I do have one UFO story, which is weird.
Yes, let's hear that one.
Well, it was probably, I think I was in 4th grade. That particular year, I can't remember, and I've not been able to find anything online about it, but for some reason there was this rumor going around that UFOs were going to land on Christmas. And I don't know where that came from, but like everybody was talking about it, and it's like, yeah, the UFOs are supposed to land on Christmas. And being like 10 years old, I was terrified, and I kept telling my parents how scared I was, and they're blowing it off and everything. And like I mentioned, that we lived in a small little town in the middle of Indiana, and my parents always took us out driving around to see the Christmas lights. And then we would go back home, and lo and behold, Santa would have been there, which is, basically we were out driving around so that, the rest of the family could come in and put the presents under the tree while they got the kids out of the house. So my brother and I were just petrified. I'm like, it's Christmas Eve and the aliens are supposed to be landing, and here we are out driving around. we were really scared. And I looked up at one point, and just over the top of the trees was this like triangular shaped thing with lights all around it in a triangle, almost like, those lights that are like in a tube that you put up at Christmas time.
Mm-hmm.
This was before we even had lights like that. And that's what it looked like. It looked like those kind of Christmas lights. But I didn't know that at the time. And I'm like, what's that? What's that? My parents are like, there's nothing there. And my brother and I, he didn't see it either. And I'm looking at it, and my dad goes, oh, it's probably a helicopter. Well, I don't know what a helicopter would be doing on Christmas Eve in this little farming town. But, it just terrified the heck out of me. And I've always wondered, did I see something? Was it like like that thing where if you manifest it out, that it comes to you? Did I do that? What's that called? A tulpa?
Yeah, tulpa, or a thought form. Yeah, you mentioned that in your email, and that is kind of interesting because nobody else saw it. And I don't know exactly if that's how tulpas worked, where they can just manifest for the person that manifested them, and negating everyone else out of the picture. But the fact that you had been so terrified of this thing makes it kind of interesting that maybe that was a tulpa situation.
Maybe. And I remember the next morning, going downstairs, because we always had, like Christmas Eve at my grandma's house, and we'd open presents, and then we would come back home and go straight to bed, which was, the parents had already gone down and put all of the presents under the tree in the basement. And that we had to get straight to bed so that we didn't go down and see the presents under the tree. I got up the next morning, and I was so afraid I was going to go down the stairs, and instead of presents from Santa, there were going to be aliens standing there. I was just terrified. Obviously everything was fine, but maybe it was just the whole entire that rumor, because I know I wasn't the only kid who was in fear of that at the time. So maybe there was something to it. I don't know, but I've never seen anything like that ever again. But when we first moved here to Arizona, my stepson, he's in his early 20s. I had gone outside in the backyard one night, and I looked up in the sky, and I saw something. It looked like something as big as a jet, but it was like just hovering. And I couldn't quite make it out. It was pretty low, but it was just hovering there. I thought, well, that was strange. And it was dark at night, so I went back in the house, didn't think much of it, and thought, heck, we live by an airport. We live by a military base. It was probably something to do with any of that. I didn't think about it anymore after that. But then my stepson came home from work about a week later, and he said, I saw the weirdest thing today. There was this plane or something that was in the south sky, and it was just hovering. I'm like, okay, so it wasn't just me again this time either. And I have no idea.
How far away from you was that? Could you guess on distance on that thing?
Probably not more than, it was between my house and where the airport is. We live maybe 5 miles from a small airport, Mesa Gateway Airport. And so it would have been between our house and there. And it would have been about where a helicopter would be if the helicopter was, flying low to look around and see traffic or whatever. It was probably about that height. I don't know how long it is. I'm not good with the measurements, but, not far. And it was pretty low. But I thought, well, maybe it's just some kind of helicopter vehicle that that I'm seeing from a funny angle. And you know how sometimes you can look at a plane from a funny angle and it looks like it's just hovering there, but it's not. But it wasn't. I mean, we hear the planes going over our house all day, and it wasn't making any noise, and it was just sitting there. And it wasn't like a blimp or anything like that. It looks like more like a cross between probably a plane and I don't know, a plane and a helicopter maybe. But
as far as the shape goes?
Yeah. And I didn't stare at it very long because I just thought, you're seeing things. You're reading too much into this, don't worry about it. Went on about my way. Yeah, so then when he came home talking about it a little while later, I was just so freaked out. Especially since, we live in Phoenix and things happen out here all the time. So, people are always seeing things.
Sure do. Yes, they do. Yes. I mean, look at the Phoenix lights, everybody. Being that close to, I know around Mesa because of the whole avian vet situation. You guys are lucky enough to have one of those out there.
Oh my gosh, you know Dr. Griffith?
Yes. Love that place.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Been there. Unfortunately for emergency situations, but yeah.
Oh, well, he's the guy who, when I lived in Indiana, he interned at the veterinary clinic where I worked.
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
And then when I moved out here, and then when I moved out here and I saw that he had his own practice and everything, and I was like, oh my gosh, really? So yeah, I feel like I'm so lucky to have him.
That's a small world. But yeah. You guys are so lucky to have that practice out there. Because we've driven the 5-hour drive from Vegas to Mesa for that specific reason, for the birds. When you love the babies, you do whatever you need to do to get them back on track. So, speaking of back on track, sorry everybody, but my question was going to be, you're just outside Phoenix and Mesa, and then now again, just like with anything, it takes people being willing to report it to then have a report to look at. But did you hear of anybody, saying, hey, there was a weird aircraft in the sky, or did the news pick it up at all?
No, not that I'm aware of. And to be honest, I wasn't really looking for it. So,
right.
I honestly just figured it was something that I saw that I, overthought. And it still may have been, but I just thought it was interesting that my stepson had seen the same thing.
And he thought it was weird too, though, right? I mean,
Oh, he did. Yeah. He's like, I saw the weirdest thing. And he had seen it in pretty much the same area that I had, which, also kind of made me think, well, maybe it's just something that's supposed to be there, but who knows? I mean, it's Arizona. Who knows?
Yeah, all kinds of, especially in that area. I mean, you got all kinds of stuff. I mean, you have you mentioned Air Force bases and things. I mean, we have Nellis here. And then, of course, everyone goes, well, you have Area 51 right there, too, which is not exactly true. Nellis is more right here than Area 51, I'll tell you that. But how about the one in 4th grade, Lisa? How big was that? And was that also completely silent craft as well?
Oh, totally silent, yeah. I was in the car with my mom and dad, and it was wintertime, so we didn't have the windows down or anything. But if it was an airplane, even like a small private airplane, you would have been able to hear it.
Right.
We were just driving around looking at the Christmas lights in the neighborhood. And
well, with it being just over the tops of the trees, especially, that's not up very high.
No, and it was a part of town that was pretty much out in the country. The whole town was out in the country, to be fair. But it wasn't like way out over a cornfield. It was more over one of the neighborhoods, I guess you would say. Just floating there. I don't know what it could have been. It may very well have been something that was supposed to be there, but in my freaked out little 10-year-old mind, I couldn't make any sense of it for sure. So I've always wondered, just made me.
What would be a size comparison for that one, do you think?
Maybe a school bus. maybe the size of a school bus, except in a triangle, like
Right.
arrowhead shape.
That's weird. That is so weird. I'm sorry, but if I saw something like that, I'd be like, this is the coolest thing ever. And weird, of course. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I had already talked myself into thinking, the aliens were going to be taking us over that night anyway. So I I didn't have a well enough developed sense of common knowledge at that time to think it was anything different than what I was afraid of, really, I guess.
You're like, I hope you're just taking the people because the car won't fit right inside the bus-sized triangular ship. So let's get you need a bigger ship, guys.
I had nothing to go on as far as what was supposed to happen or what that whole thing would look like.
Probably really good. Thank goodness, right? Yeah, in fourth grade, that's true. Thankfully, you probably wouldn't have come across a whole lot of that. I mean, now we're so, especially those of us that we listen to other podcasts or we're doing the shows, and we're hearing horrible stories, and we're indoctrinated into missing time and marks on your body. And just look at Travis Walton. I mean, no, that's on the no list. That's horrifying.
Yeah. And it's interesting, come to think of it, there was that capsule in the sky thing and then this UFO thing, and I just realized my brother was with us another time when I did see something else weird, but we were in North Carolina, at Carolina Beach. And I think my granddaughter was just a year old, and my daughter was there with us and my brother, and we were just kind of sitting, having a beer on the back steps. It was nighttime, and we're looking out over the ocean, and I saw this orange light, like, flash, and then another one a little bit ahead of it, and then another one ahead of that one. It's like 3 of them. And they were taking turns flashing, kind of. And I thought it was like, landing lights of some type. And then I thought, well, now, wait a minute, there's nothing out there. And they weren't moving. They were just totally in place. Just 1, 2, 3, blink, blink, blink. And we all got to looking at it, and I'm like, what could that possibly be? And eventually they just quit blinking. So I don't know what that could have been.
What was everybody else saying about those?
The same thing. I mean, it was just, the 3 of us. And my brother was like, well, maybe it's some sort of a military thing, where they're signaling each other or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but wouldn't they be moving? They wouldn't be like just stuck there. And again, there was no noise, except for the ocean. And that was really weird. It was up in the sky, so it wasn't like it could have been ships in the water. So I don't have any answers on that either.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if, because you said the landing light, so it made me think of then like one craft, and then just with different lights on the face of it or underneath whatever you were looking at. If it wasn't 3 separate things in a straight line, because you've heard that before. People say they line up, and then whoop, the other one goes off this side, and the other one goes off that side. But that one sounded like, I mean, with how big is it? It's really tough when things are in the sky. But if you're going off of it's one craft, would it have been something pretty massive?
Oh yeah, if that was the case. I mean, it seemed more like at first what I thought it was like, how like up in the mountains you can see, I guess it's the telephone and the electric lines, and they'll have all the poles, and then the lines go to the next one and then to the next one, and up on the top of them they'll have blinking lights. Mm-hmm. That's what came to mind when I saw that. But no, that was out over the middle of the ocean, because that's about how far apart space they were. So, however, I mean, 2 or 3 football fields, I guess.
Yeah, it's a big one. Yeah. If it is one thing, right? If not, though, either way, it's a cool sighting. Yeah,
I mean, it was fun to sit there and, talk about what it might be. I wasn't scared at all that time. I figured it was something to do with airplanes or whatever. But again, they didn't go anywhere. They just were there. And then, the next morning we went and looked out, and I halfway expected to see some sort of some sort of lines of some sort or something. But nope, there's nothing there. Absolutely nothing there. Just air and ocean. So yeah. And it just kind of came to me a second ago that once again my brother was there with me.
Maybe there's something about being with your brother then that kind of drags these things in, right?
That's what I'm wondering. He's about as like Jim Harold says, and about as sensitive as a rock.
Mm-hmm.
That would be him, but yeah.
I know
coming
the feeling.
from our family, maybe he's more sensitive than he thinks he is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much what I say. I am about like a rock, so I totally understand that sentiment. So what about this, you mentioned the ghost hunting group in Kokomo, Indiana. Like what's a story or two or encounter or two, I should say, that really stuck out to you that was maybe it doesn't have to be scary, but any memorable ones from them?
Oh yeah. I sent you an EVP just like right before you called, so you probably didn't have a chance to look at it. But there's an EVP that I think was the best one I ever captured. There were a few places that we would go to kind of on the regular. And this one particular place was called Rhodes Hotel. And I think it's still there. It's in Atlanta, Indiana. And there was a group of us who had belonged to like the state, I think it was called Indiana Ghost Hunters. But then maybe 5 or 6 of us sort of split off into our own little group and did things. And this particular night, it was just me, and there were, I think, 3 or 4 of the guys. So, I'm the only female in the place. Well, this particular building had once been like a brothel. And it was rumored that some of the gangsters had been there, like Al Capone, I think it was. Don't remember exactly who. But there was a lot of activity that had been caught there, mainly negative activity. Like there's one guy that was there that they think was like the pimp and was abusive to the girls and things like that. And then they were talking about a little boy as well. While we were sitting outside, I think they called him the boss. That's what they called the guy, the boss. And so a couple of the guys were sitting in this room, and me and another gentleman who knew the place really well, we were sitting on the floor outside of the room, and he was telling us about the room and everything. And I was just talking about how beautiful the place is. And I can totally understand why someone wouldn't want to leave, after they had died, why they wouldn't want to leave this building. And about that time, all of the hair on my arms stood up. And the guy next to me, and I just kind of stopped what I was saying, and I said, wow. And the guy next to me says, oh, yeah, my hair on my legs just stood up. And we didn't hear it at the time, but when we played back, there's an extremely clear voice of a little boy. And when I said, I don't blame you, it's beautiful, I would want to stay here too, this little boy's voice goes, stay. It's so creepy.
We appreciate you letting us stop by. It's a beautiful house. I don't blame you for wanting to hang out here. Wow.
My legs are standing on it right now. So. Sorry if I come in later on.
It's a beautiful house. I don't blame you for wanting to hang out here. Wow.
My legs are standing on it right now. So. Sorry if I come in later on.
There was another one at a different place, and I had my friend Jill trying to find it for me today because I've lost it since then, and her computer has lost it too. So anyway, but we went to Whispers Estate, which is in southern Indiana, and a friend of ours actually owns the place. And so we got to go down there quite a few times. One of the entities that they say lives in this Whispers estate, but it used to be owned by a doctor. And it was his daughter, Rachel, that had been in a fire and had gotten burned really badly and then had died as a result of her burns in this house. And we had a room that there were lots of toys in there, and they called it Rachel's room. And, you know, we would go in there and see if she wanted to push balls around on the floor and whatever. And there were lots of dolls, really creepy dolls. And my friend Jill and my friend Candy and I, we were all three of us sitting in there on the bed. And Jill was saying that, you know, we wondered why she didn't come out and like interact with us, and, you know, didn't she want to come play or whatever. And we caught an EVP of this little girl, plain as day, saying, "Isn't anybody going to play with me?" I mean, ugh.
That's a long one. And it was that clear?
Yes, yes. And neither of us can seem to find that. But if I ever find it, I'll send it to you, because that was like the clearest thing I've ever heard in my life, except for this one that I sent you. That one's pretty clear as well.
I like the EVPs when they are in direct correlation with what is going on at the time or whatever had been asked at the time. You know, that puts a lot more validity behind the EVPs.
It does. I mean, there, you know, I think that a lot of times we kind of overthink it and listen way too hard and try to find things that aren't there. But every now and then you just get one that kind of slaps you in the face and you can't say, that's not what that was. Yeah, so I think that was the spirit of the little boy in the Rhodes Hotel. The other thing about that was, I told you I was the only female present that night. And I'd gone out to, I think I went down the road to get a Coke or something at the gas station. And I came back and we had all the lights off in the house, but there was a flashlight shining out towards where the parking area was. And I could see this flashlight going off and on, off and on. And I thought, well, that's weird. What are they doing in there? Because the guys were all still in there doing stuff. And I came out and I started to go in the door. And one of the gentlemen came out and said that they had been talking about me and wanted to know if they wanted me to come back in because I had left. And so the flashlight was like answering their questions, you know? So that was weird. And then I couldn't find this particular one either, but there was another really, really distinct EVP that we caught that night where I was coming around the corner and I was talking about, I don't know, the girls who had worked there or something. And this very distinct voice just all of a sudden goes, "What?" Totally called me a 4-letter word.
It's not very nice.
And no, and it was very plain, very loud. You know, and these are ones that, I mean, they it's not like you had to listen and put it together. It's like It completely took up when the whole entire screen whenever you were looking at it on the sound thing.
Well, you were
words are hard to say.
You were well, I know. Welcome to my world, right? I'm like, oh my goodness, spit it out, Shannon. I mean, you were essentially the bait going into the Rhodes Hotel then.
Apparently that day I didn't, you know, we didn't look at it that way, but
right.
We sure did get a lot of good stuff. And, you know, there was a website that I put together and I put all this stuff on. I think it was a blog spot, and I kind of had forgotten about it over the past few years, and it's been taken down, but I've been trying to see if I can go back in and find it again. And same with my friend Jill. I think she said she had a website too with a lot of stuff on it from Rhodes Hotel and Whispers Estate. And but yeah, the only one I could savage was that little boy telling me to stick around, stay.
Well, and that's so cool that you didn't actually hear it. You caught it on the recorder, but at the same time, you and that gentleman, you felt it like come around you. You felt that something was going on. You just didn't know what it was at the time.
Yeah, it was bizarre. There was another one too, where, I mean, during that, in that same room, we were all just kind of walking around, looking around, and I could hear somebody whistling. So when I was, going over the tape after we'd left the place and gone home the next day and reviewing all of the tape and everything, and I heard all this whistling. And so I called up the guy who was there with me and asked him, "Was that you?" And he's like, "No, it wasn't me." Nobody else had it. They had like the same, they recorded the same time period, but none of them had the whistling like I did. So it was weird. So that place, and I think that I'm not 100% sure since I've left Indiana, but I think maybe they closed down that place for investigations and like a private person who's bought it. So I don't know.
They have to
or
be
maybe
having
not.
activity.
Yes. Or maybe they bought it, lived there for a while, but I think I saw where maybe they're still doing investigations there. I'm not sure, but that place was very, those ghosts had a lot to say. That's what that was.
Yeah, because you mentioned how beautiful the place was. So it's kind of one of those things where you're going, well, it's cool that it's somebody loves it enough to buy it and stay there, hopefully for a long time. But how long do they last if people are being called 4-letter words and there's maybe some other roommates going on? Would people see apparitions there ever?
I am not sure. I think somebody did, maybe shadow people or something. But as far as I remember, nobody in our group ever did. But there was a gentleman who was the one who was sitting on the floor with me when all of the electrical feeling happened. But he really had investigated the place a whole lot with a lot of different people. I should try to contact him and tell him to talk to you sometime, because he's had fascinating experiences there.
Yeah, that would be cool. And I want to look into that Rhodes Hotel. I've never heard of that place, so that would be kind of cool to see actually what's going down there now, if it is in fact just owned by someone that maybe has no interest in this stuff, and or if it's changed hands quite a few times over the years,
Yeah. I don't know how many times, but I know that when we lived there, I think the people who owned the place, I think their son was really ill or something, and so they had given up the house. And I don't remember the exact situation, but I feel like somebody else bought it after that, and then now it's being investigated again, and I don't know. But yeah, those places kind of in between Indianapolis and Chicago, have got quite a bit of history.
Yeah, most places in the country, apart from our states, Lisa, have so much more. They have more years on them, So
yeah.
A lot of those places are in the Midwest or the East Coast, and we got cool places too. Don't get me wrong, but they're a little older out there.
We end up with like Skinwalker Ranch and stuff, or just everything.
Yeah. We trump you by having all of it in one place, okay?
Yeah.
So,
and I live just at the foot of the Superstitions, so.
Oh man,
there's that.
So much stuff goes on there. Yeah, or even you go to a place like Mount Shasta. Mount Adams has its own stuff, of course, but yeah. Even I would say that on this side of the country, it almost does feel more like landmarks have more interest than, or hold more interest, I should say, with paranormal activity or cryptids or UFOs than maybe structures do, which is kind of interesting.
Sometimes when you drive out into the desert, you just get this feeling of like, so many have been here before me, but there's nobody here.
Yeah, I think the best example of that is from the because the desert can be just as creepy as the woods. And I think the best example of that is the movie Banshee Chapter. I know I've talked about it before. It's about DMT and what happens when you take it, and it's a spooky little movie. But there's a scene where she's driving in the desert, and then she stops, and she's kind of doing the, it's just her in the car, and it's pitch black because it's the desert, can't see a thing, and she's like scanning with this high power flashlight, and she comes across this essentially a humanoid creature figure out in the desert. And it's a great jump scare because they do the with the violin noise when it comes up, and you're going, I hate you for doing that to me. Good creepy stuff. And it's a perfect example of, the desert can be very creepy too, and hold its own secrets. Yeah.
And so many Native American things, so much wisdom out there that they know a whole lot more about it than we do, and they don't mess with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just going to say places that they're like, you shouldn't be there, like you shouldn't be messing around there, like they're like kind of going, why do you think we didn't do it for all these years? Like, you need to listen to us.
Exactly.
Please take heed. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what about this out-of-body experience? Do you feel like sharing that one?
Oh, yeah. Well, that was, yeah. So I don't even know how to explain it. I was living in Minneapolis, and my husband was traveling for work. And this night I had gone to bed. I wasn't feeling the greatest, to be honest. It's just me in this house, and I was new to the whole entire state. I had just moved up there to live with him. This house we lived in was maybe, 125 years old or something, something along those lines. And it had a lot of old feeling to it. It had a lot of character, and it was wonderful. But, I was a little bit creeped out being there by myself, to be honest. And so I went to bed, and I woke up, and I went to stand up and go to the bathroom or whatever, but instead it was like I kind of floated up and turned around, as well as almost like I was swimming in the air, and I could kind of control where I was going. And I was like, well, this is a weird dream. I don't think I've ever had a dream quite like this before. And, I'm popping around the room, and I'm looking down at the bed, and I don't see myself in the bed, but yet I'm sort of up at the ceiling, floating around. And I thought, well, maybe this is one of those, out-of-body experiences. I mean, I'm talking to myself the whole time. You've lost it, Lisa. You're losing it. And I thought, well, okay, it's just a dream. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get in my dresser drawer, and I'm going to take this ring that my daughter sent me. It was one of those rings that you would put in a bath bomb, and then, you get the ring in the bath. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I took the ring, and I said, I'm going to put it someplace where I wouldn't normally put it. And I put it in the middle of the floor in this little box in between my room and the bathroom. So I would either have to trip over it the next day or not, and then I would know it was a dream. And, and I eventually made my way back down and went back to sleep. And, the next morning I woke up and didn't remember it. I just knew that I had not slept very well the night before. And I went walking towards the bathroom, and I kicked this little box that was in the middle of the floor.
Oh my gosh.
And and it came back. I was like, well, either I was sleepwalking or I had an out-of-body experience. But, my how it felt was that I was like swimming through the air, and I could push off the walls and things. It was crazy. And it's not something I've ever really told anybody because it sounds insane. But, I've heard other people mention similar experiences. So, there it is.
Oh, no, absolutely. And the fact that, if it's a dream, I guess if you're in a dream state, your dream told you to tell yourself that you were actually up out of bed because you looked down in bed and you were not there.
Right. Yeah.
And it's been a while since I've had it on my show occasionally, stories of astral travel. And if you don't know the answer, this is totally fine, but I really am wondering because I cannot remember. When someone is astral traveling, can they look down on themselves and see themselves, in bed or in the chair or wherever it is?
That's what I've always heard, which, that's why it made me think that I was just dreaming. It was so lucid, and I remember looking down and seeing that the sheets were sort of, or the covers were sort of folded back to, as like where I'd gotten up from. And I thought, well, that's weird. If I'm having an OBE, then shouldn't I see myself down there? I had this all going through my head, but
and the sheets were turned down, like as if you had, like got up out of bed and turned them down, like you would if you were getting up and standing up.
Yeah, like you know how you just sort of push your feet aside and then you stand up and you come up and grab them and come back.
Yeah,
they were pushed aside like I had just gotten up out of bed. But I was like floating up in the ceiling, looking at a cobweb up in the corner, and like
right.
I'm seeing the nubs on the ceiling and thinking, oh yeah, that's right, this house is really old. You can see sort of like wooden planks where they would be if all of the ceiling stuff was taken down. And, I guess I really explored the room quite a bit, one way or another.
I mean, so, okay, because, with the skeptical glasses, it's like, okay, but that would be not only a dream, but a sleepwalking incident at the same time. Kind of, you know what I mean? Because you had the whole experience of floating and looking down and not seeing yourself there, and you're looking at the cobweb, but then you did this whole thing with the ring in the box, so which it was there the next morning. So, wow.
I know. I don't quite know how to put that together either, but
that one's cool. I mean, if you say you're kind of sensitive, I wonder if you. Stories like this freak me out, and I don't think I'd want to travel. I don't want to astral travel. That sounds freaky to me. Because people will actually practice. Yeah, and people practice, and they're like, okay, well, tomorrow night I'll go up out of my roof and then to the neighbor's house, and then the next night they're like, okay, I'll go across town, and it's like, that's freaky to me. God bless you, but that is freaky stuff. I just wonder if, and not that I'm not advocating or I am advocating this. If people can do it, that's awesome. But would you even want to practice something like that? Like, would that be something you would want to explore?
Well, not really at this time, but I'll tell you, I mentioned that my husband and I had gone through about 11 years worth of trying to work it out to where we could be together. And when we had first started seeing each other, I lived in Indiana and he lived in Austin, Texas. And I don't remember exactly what the situation was, but he was going to be somewhere at a certain time on this certain day. And I guess he was going to be by himself and I was going to be by myself. And I was going to try to see if we could connect that way, just for grins. We were just kind of like, so madly in love, and we couldn't be together at that time. And so we were just like, let's see what happens. This particular time, we'll think of each other, And so I just laid down and I was thinking about him because I knew where he would be sitting. I'd been to visit him and I knew where this place was. I think it was in a park or at a cafe or something. But so I'm just like concentrating and I pictured myself like sitting next to him, but like he was sitting or standing, whatever he was doing. And I was leaning up against his left leg. And I just concentrated on that. And I just tried to picture that particular spot in my mind and just kind of go there, And I think eventually I fell asleep. And the next day when we talked, we talked about it, and he said, I don't know. He goes, but I can tell you that at one point, my left leg felt like it fell asleep.
Oh my gosh, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's like, I don't consider myself like psychic or anything, but when I string together all the silly little things that have happened to me like this, it's kind of hard to ignore. It's like, what's happening?
That is
I just
dang
down
cool.
my toes and
Lisa.
everything.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that is cool. You could do it if you really tried. I mean, again, I think it sounds like you're like me. You're like, that's kind of freaky. I don't know, but that's so neat. His left leg fell asleep.
Yeah, he said that, I don't know what he was doing. He was, gosh, I have COVID brain, so I'm sorry. But plus being 56, you don't remember stuff as well as you used to. But he was doing whatever he was doing, and he said he felt like his left leg fell asleep, and it was almost like his breath just was taken away, and like he just couldn't even speak at that particular moment, and then of course eventually it faded. So I don't know, maybe I did.
That is very cool. I like that story a lot.
Yeah, we're like super close, like weird close. It's hard to explain, but just when we met, it was just like, oh, I know who you are.
Okay, like
I need to be with you. Yeah, but we were both married at that time, and neither one of us had been looking to. I had gone on a website to kind of keep track of my daughter because she'd just gotten a tattoo and she was really young, and I wanted to make sure that she wasn't gonna like meet up on this website with a bunch of crazy guys, and somebody's going to take advantage of her somehow. So I got on the website too and made this is like, gosh, it was way back before even Facebook, even MySpace was a thing, like my husband and I talked about how we used to FaceTime before there was FaceTime.
Right.
Just figured it out. And that's how we met. And it was just like the weirdest thing. Like that was absolutely not the time in my life when I needed to be, looking for somebody to fall in love with. I was doing just great. So was he, and just things happened over the years. And eventually we knew we needed to be together, but we both lived in different states. And then he had to move to another state, and I was going through other stuff. And, and then we finally got together. But I think it was just almost that wanting to be together so much that maybe something happened.
And is he sensitive at all as well, or is it just mostly you?
I don't think he is as much. I'm one of those people where I can tell if somebody's lying, or if they're not sincere, or if they're just being not, And I've always felt that way about things, and I thought everybody was that way. Like somebody would come in and say something, and they'd leave the room, and I'm like, yeah, they're full of shit. They're not going to do that. And everybody's like, well, how do you know that? I can just tell. Can't you tell? So I think that some people just have, I don't know if it's body language or what, but yeah, that's kind of how I am. But he's more, he's an engineer, and he is extremely intelligent. He comes from a family of extremely intelligent, logical people. In fact, they didn't have pets growing up. Isn't that the craziest thing you've ever heard in your life?
That is actually the strangest thing of this entire episode. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't get that at all.
Yeah. But no, I mean, they were just very New England, straight-laced people and no nonsense. So, I mean, he's a big believer he's very spiritual, very, very spiritual. But I don't think that he has the same kind of sensitivities that I do. But it works somehow. The two of us are very, like he always says, we finish each other's sandwiches,
Right. Well, it's funny, you meet someone and you just kind of know. I just wonder if, if whoever it was that if there was another person that you would have had that feeling about, that attraction to, that connection with automatically, if, you would have tried this, for lack of a better term, astral projection situation to be with that person, if it would have had the same outcome because of you, or is it both of you together?
No, I think it was the two of us together, concentrating at that one particular time. I think just both of us were just focusing on, well, if we can't really, it was just this particular point in time that we couldn't be physically together. We were together,
right,
romantically, but we were in a spot where we couldn't drop everything and move at that point. And we were working towards that. He was going through a divorce, and I was trying to get my finances in order. And, it was just that frustration of we're almost there. And so every now and then, he would call me and we would watch a TV show together. I think it was Sons of Anarchy or something we'd watch together all the time, but we had to feel connected, and it was just something funny that we thought we would do. It's okay, I'm going to be at that place where we had cheesecake when you came down here at 7:00, and so I said, okay, well, I'll be thinking of you then at that particular time. And that's how that happened.
Yeah, that's very cool. That is a very cool story. Well,
it's pretty neat.
Lisa, any others that you'd like to share?
No, maybe when my brain clears up a little bit more and I could put things together in a more coherent sort of line.
Your brain sounds plenty clear. No, these were wonderful stories, and I thank you so much for being willing to come on and share them.
Hey, there are very few people that I would feel comfortable talking about this crazy stuff with, and I've heard crazier stuff from other callers, so I'm right there with them. It's not a problem.
We're a big, weird family, that's for sure.
Well, I'm so-and-so. I was given this name by my parents. I've been to such and such a college. I've done these things in my profession. I produce a little biography. Buddha says, forget it. That's not true. That's some story. That's all gone. That's all past. I want to see the real you are now. Well, nobody knows who that is. Because we don't know ourselves except through listening to our echoes and consulting our memories. But then there's a real you, and that again leads us back to this question. Who are you? That is the real you. We shall see how they play with this exam by the koans to get you to come out of your shell and find out who you really are. on this. They will say, no, we don't believe literally in reincarnation. That after your funeral, you will suddenly become somebody different, living somewhere else. They will say reincarnation means this, that if you sitting here now are really convinced that you're the same person who walked in the door half an hour ago, you're being reincarnated. If you are liberated, you will understand that you're not. The past doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist. There is only the present. That's the only real you that there is. The Zen master Dogen put it in this way. He said, spring does not become the summer. First there is summer, and then there is spring. When you settle down in the train to read your newspaper and so on, you are not the same person who a little while ago left the platform. If you think you are linking your moments up in a chain. And this is what binds you to the wheel of birth and death. But when you know that every moment in which you are is the only moment, this comes into Zen. The master will say to somebody, get up and walk across the room. And he comes back and he says, where are your footprints? They've gone. So where are you? Who are you? When we are asked who we are, we usually give a kind of recitation of a history.